Barbara's face filled my screen. She was 58 years old, had 31 years of service, had 405,000 in her TSP. And I could see it in her eyes. She was scared. She didn't know what to do. And she said to me, she said, William, I don't know if I'm going to be okay. Now, mind you, this lady had 31 years of service, had 405,000 in her TSP. And on that Zoom call, she was terrified. Not because she did anything wrong. It's not because she didn't put a bunch of money in her TSP, not because she didn't show up to work and advance her career. She put in her time. The reason why she was afraid was because she had never talked to somebody about what was next. One of her biggest questions was, do I take from my Social Security at 62, or even though I'm getting the supplement? Do I take from my TSP? What do I do about long-term care? Do I get life insurance for my kids? Did I invest my TSP right? Now, she had mentioned to me that these things were keeping her up at night, as she was going into retirement, right? She just could not bear to withstand like the things that were on the other side of retirement. And so I asked her, I said, Barbara, before you talk to us, had you talked to anybody along the way around what good retirement planning looks like? And she was just like, no, that's why I'm on the phone with you, right? And so we both laughed. But as we got into our conversation, the thing I told her, I said, all right, Barbara, well, what we're going to do is we're going to help you build a structure. And that's what we're going to talk to you all about tonight, right? Because many of you, if you've been on our webinars before, we talk a lot about what we call your financial house. And there's a metaphor, but it's the structure that we use when we're building out retirement plans. If you're a client of ours already, we probably have went through this before, where we build a structure around making sure you have a solid foundation, making sure you have the proper walls in retirement, which is insulation from outside factors, making sure you have what we call the roof, which is making sure you're still invested where your money can have some growth, so that when you do retire, you're not thinking about coming back to work. And the reason why this is very important is, and what I told Barbara, what I tell most people is, the reality is we don't have the answers because we're really first generation. Our grandparents were too busy, preoccupied with so much other stuff that was going on in America at that time when they were working and providing and building legacies. They didn't have conversations around wealth and things to do. Our parents, because they didn't have the conversation with their grandparents, they didn't have the conversation either. So they barely were getting by. And so this is the first generation of people that look like you and I, for the most part, that are able to have conversations around generational wealth. And even though we're not living in scarcity anymore, it can feel unstable, right? Because this is all new. This is new opportunity for us. And so what I want to talk about tonight are the four mistakes that can cause real damage when it comes to your financial house. And so I'm going to bring up my slides, because if you're anything like Barbara, you've done all the right stuff, but you can still feel uneasy. And it's typically around these four things. So we'll talk about that today. And so let me describe someone, right? This might be you, right? You put in 25, 30 years of service. You got your pension coming in. You got the money in your TSP. You understand how your FEHB is working. Your FEGLI, you either got that coverage or maybe you got some other coverage, but you still feel unsure, right? There's still a question mark over your head of like, what am I missing? Is there something that can pop up where I'm not okay? Here's what I want you to understand. If I get my slides to work. Here's what I want you to understand. It's not that it's things you don't understand. It's not that your retirement plan is broken. It's just certain things that were not explained to you, where you make assumptions is just a wrong assumptions. And so one of the things I had to talk to Barbara about was, look, don't make the mistake that a lot of people make, which is because you're unsure, you make hasty decisions. And because you make hasty decisions, you can make mistakes. I have a client who, when I met with her 3 years ago. And one of the things one of the things that was affecting her was she just wasn't sure how she was going to be able to take care of her husband, right? Her husband wasn't a federal employee, and she was just unsure of what to do with that. And so she started investing her money really aggressively, and then taking money out to put money different places just because she was under a lot of duress, just unsure because her husband's health wasn't the best. And this lady, when we talked, she had about 600,000 in her TSP. About a year and a half later, because she just again was just really really anxious about the decisions that she needed to make around her husband. And again, she just didn't have the education. When we talked, she was down around 200,000. And I asked her, I said, "What happened?" And she's like, "Well, I just was afraid. I didn't know what to do. It just was a disaster, right?" And so what I had to do was I had to sit her down and I had to slowly help her rebuild up her retirement plan by using the structure that we talk about often, which is the financial house, right? And the reason why we call it the financial house is because I've been doing this now in April 16th is going to be 20 years. I mean, 18 years, almost 20, but 18 years. It's been 17 years and about 9 months. And in that time frame, I've seen clients go from being 60 years old to now in their 70s. I've seen people go from 45 to now 50, late 50s in retirement. So I've seen the gamut. I've seen people who retired when they were in their 60s and now they're no longer with us, but I'm still helping their family navigate everything that they set up. So I've seen from A to Z when it comes to retirement planning. And so when we talk about this financial house, it comes from experience of that. This is something that we created because what we notice as a team that if people have these things in place, they don't have the anxiousness, the anxiety, the fear, making rash decisions, because if it's there, then we can always return back to it. And there's a great metaphor that when we meet with our clients on our annual sessions, and you hope and they bring us stuff, we're like, hey, well, let's look in the financial house to see exactly where you are. So that foundation is super important. And the reason why that foundation is super important because it helps you avoid the mistakes that you can make to make it like the lady I was mentioning. Let's just call her Lisa, who made the mistake of drawing down so much on her TSP because she had some anxiety around what to do with her husband's health they both retired. And so when it comes to foundation, you want to make sure you understand your income. You don't want to go into retirement assuming your income will be one thing. Because when it comes to your income will fluctuate. If you retire and let's say your income is 3,000 a month from the pension and another 2,000 a month from Social Security, right? For example, in 5 years, your income is going to be different with those amounts because they have cost of living increases, right? And so those things will go up. And so don't make rash decisions around your income when that will go up. So and I mean that out of fear. Yesterday, I was talking to a lady and we were going through her expenses. Her biggest expense was her mortgage. But when we calculate mortgage in our retirement analyzer system, the mortgage doesn't have inflation on it because your mortgage isn't affected by inflation. And so one of the things that she thought was she needed to draw more income from her TSP because she didn't think her income will go up with inflation. She just didn't think it. But the way her bills were designed, when we ran it through our retirement analyzer system, her income outpaced her expenses because our system also calculates the inflation in certain items and it automates that, right, based on what the item is. And so what she saw in her particular situation was she's like, wow, Will, my income is so much higher than my expenses later on down the line. And I was like, yes, that's because your biggest expenses don't have a lot of inflation tied to them. And she was relieved. But what that did was her expectation of what she needed to take from her TSP went down, right? If she never talked to us, she would have took way more out of her TSP unnecessarily just because she didn't have the education, right? And so that's one of the mistakes that you can make when it comes to your foundation. You want to know what your income is and the projections out into the future, right? And she didn't take into account the increase in Social Security. She lived in Georgia. The Social Security is taxed very differently in Georgia. So we went through all those things. And so those are the mistakes that people make when it comes to that foundation. So you want to know those things because the foundation is critical to your retirement because that's the thing that you engage in the most, right? Your paycheck is what you engage in the most. It's the most important aspect of retirement is what you're getting paid every month, once a month in a direct deposit. That's your lifeline. So you want to be clear on what that is now and into the future. And then we have number two, when it comes to our financial house, is the walls. The walls, we like to say, is us helping you avoid tax changes, right? Because Trump's taxes are different than Biden's taxes, are different than Obama's taxes. And every new president, there's usually some shifts around the way things are taxed. So I always talk about how in 2019 Trump changed with the Secure Act. They slipped it in the back door. The Secure Act was all about COVID and everything like that, but they slipped this Roth 10-year rule in there. And what that Roth 10-year rule does, it affects you and I. It affects middle class families who are trying to leave wealth to their families. And that rule, that simple legislation, created a big tax problem when we're leaving money to our children. Huge. And so when it comes to the wall, is making sure the mistake people make is not coordinating their benefits so that it becomes strong. And so we always talk about the Roth conversions here. We talk about making sure that if you have TSP, you making sure that's invested properly, but there's other IRAs and things like that that can help you outpace inflation, right? Because if you have money sitting in the G fund, that's the only place you have to safe, you're going to get crushed by inflation. I mean, TSP even puts it on the website like they do cigarette labels. Like this particular fund can cause debt, can cause you to lose buying power. So beware. And what they mean by buying power is, when it comes to healthcare healthcare costs have continued to go up. And so and I bring this up all the time, it's when 10 years ago, when I would talk to married couples or even single folks, the cost of health insurance was no more than $400 for married folks. And for a single person, you're looking at between $100-$150 is what they were paying for health insurance. I was talking to a married couple today. They're paying $781 for their health insurance. Now, those same costs impact folks in retirement, but if their income is not rising to that level when it comes to the healthcare piece, and so those are the type of things you want to make sure that your TSP, even though it's sitting there, is rising in cost. Another big thing when it comes to medical is the cost of long-term care in retirement. Now, that's not a fixed bill that you're paying every month, but if you have a medical emergency or you've taken care of someone that's older, one of your parents, aunts, uncles, things like that, or seen a friend do it, the cost of that care has gone up tremendously. So one thing you can do as a federal employee is make sure your TSP is growing or investments are growing at a pace that outpaces inflation. And so that's something that you can do when it comes to the walls. And then as far as the roof goes, and the roof is what we like to say is how much do you have invested into the market? A lot of times what you see, especially on the news, and I warn you as a federal employee, when it comes to the news and they're talking about finances and how to invest your money and things like that, majority of the time, the vast majority of the time, they're talking about a person that does not have a pension. The majority of Americans don't have pensions. So you're going to hear people say, you want to do these safe investments because you're at this age, you want to be more conservative, and you can be conservative. There's no doubt about that. But as a federal employee, they're not speaking to you, because the thing is, most federal employees, vast majority of you all, when it comes to retiring, your social security plus your pension can typically cover your bills. So if that's the case, your TSP is not something that you're living off of for income. Whereas the vast majority of Americans, your friends, your cousins, people like that, their 401k is something that they're living off of. The day they turn in their retirement papers, they're drawing down on that on a monthly basis to live off of, along with their Social Security. And so for them, they have to be ultra conservative in that investment, because if it drops, that's a big deal for them. And I say that to say, when it comes to you all, that's not the same case. You can afford to take a bit more risk, to think more long term, because you're not living off of your TSP on an annual basis. And if you are, what you could do is, and we could put it like in the structure of a financial house, you take the portion that you need for income, you put that in a separate fund, and let that fund out your income, so you can be more aggressive with the other money, which will then help you in the future when it comes to long-term care. right? And so that's what mistake number 4 is, just not having a clear sequence, not having, and we call this the floor plan. If you have all those things lined up, you have a floor plan, your well-designed house, and you can build it. And we use it as a metaphor, but this is really how retirement planning works. We get clients that come to us all the time, and some of y'all are on this chat, and you come and you bring your stuff, and it's really easy to talk to you. Sometimes I might think like, I don't want to bother you, but it's really easy for me to tie these conversations because, one, I like to educate, and then two, we just have a vetted system, and so and we make sure we put everybody in that situation so that if the market goes crazy, we take that into account, right? We always make sure that you have your protected money in a safe place. So if the market goes crazy and you're panicking, that's fine. We hop on a call, I listen to you, and I remind you, like, yeah, we prepared for this. And so you just want to make sure you have a blueprint. Comes to taxes, yes, RMDs are coming for sure. We made a plan for that, And so just wanted to address those things because without having a structure and plan, a structure in place that's personal to you, the costs can be stress. One of the things I always talk to clients about, and I love having this conversation when people are like, well, Mr. Smith, I can't travel, I can't buy the dream car I want to have. I quickly go in and show, like, what's the car you want? What's the vacation you want to take? Because you've worked 25, 30, 35 years for this moment to be the moment where you can travel and do what you want to do. It's no more, you sacrificed your whole life. Like, let's talk about the things you want to do because you can't take it with you. And so the one thing that I want to just make sure we avoid, the real cost of stress. People get sick. I mean, because of what I do, I hear stories, I talk to folks, I talk to their families. People retire, get sick because of stress. They hesitate, they lose confidence in themselves, and that causes a whole mess. If you just have a plan and you plan for the things you want to do, it gives you the peace of mind, the purpose to fully embrace retirement in a way that's amazing. And that's what we're focused on. We're focused on at Fed Legacy this year. We're focused on you being a first generation person that can actually leave wealth in your family, right? We want to make sure that you are doing that in the right way. We want to make sure we see the structure before you act, making sure you understand how it is before you make any rash decisions, so that as you plan and go into retirement for you, your family, that you are actually creating the thing that can last not only now, but even beyond you. And you can have all the fun that you want to have. We just want to make sure that you do that. So what I want to do is I want to one, I would love to help you build the house. Me and my team, we have a team of 6 advisors. You book a call with us. We'll make sure every single one of us will take you through this financial house sequence. We call it our TSP finish line process. And in that, we would do that. And we'll talk about that consistently on these calls this year, because again, my whole motivation this year is helping you as a first generation person who had nobody teaching you this stuff. I had to go out and seek this information myself. Is my personal passion to re-deliver this stuff because I see the impact it can have on families. And it's my personal passion to make sure that even though you're the first generation, it's the first of many generations where your kids are starting businesses in the future, your grandkids are starting businesses in the future. My last call today, the lady said to me, is one of the main things that she would like help with. She's like, I want to make sure my youngest grandchild is rich. And she stuttered, and I said, so you want to make sure your youngest grandchild is rich? And she was like, oh, she tried to dial it back. She's like, well, no, not like that. I was like, no, own it. That young child deserves that, right? You put in a lot of work. You can help with that. Now, obviously, you got to help shape her mind, help her understand like what money is, help her understand what her purpose is, all those type of things for sure. But once she understands what her purpose is, understands the impact she wants to make, understands how money works, why not? Right? That's what we need. We need our children and our grandchildren to live out their gifts so we have a better overall community. And so I could talk all day about that, but what I wanted to do is just open up for Q&A. You can see the link here around fedlegacycall.com. You go there, you can book a call with me and my team, and we'll make sure we get you on the call.